Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for November 3rd, 2023. I'm Benji Fisher moderating, and also here are Ralph Kohler, who's sharing his screen, and we'll start off the discussion. Aaron McHale, Christina Chimias, and Simo Helston. Welcome all. Thanks for coming. And Ralph, go ahead. Oh, actually, before you start, Christina just joined a minute ago. Is there something you'd like to discuss, Christina?
Nothing specific.
Okay, then go ahead, Ralph. Ralph, you're still muted.
Apologies. Thank you. I've said the first issue is one Laurie added the needs usability review about 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's make description field labels consistent. Issue number is 3365222. And I think the best thing is we quickly go through all the pages. I've already opened corresponding tabs that are listed in that table here. At first, let's start with the block types. Basically, at block type, you have description, and the description for that field displays on the block types page. Add comment type is description displays on the comment type page. Add content type is description displays on the content types page. Same is media type is description displays on the media types page. Add menu, that is the first different one. It just says administrative summary without any description and any further explanations what it might be. Then you have add vocabulary. That is also just description. And then you have add view there. You basically have an opt-in for description. You have to check, and then you get that. And the last detail, is add block content. And that is I walk you quickly through. It's also listed in the table, and it's probably a bit of a problematic one because in particular with a new issue that's coming in, I just have to reload that. Add block content, basic block. So now, you now have the save button, which brings you back, for example, if you make a test and save, you get back to the block list. But if you go on and let's say we follow the lead and you have block description, you would expect something more prose, something more expressive and verbose. Blocks that communicate the values of our group and be clear and explicit about it, so everyone is able to understand what the being in the group is all about. And if you go now to save and configure, that description gets transferred into the title as well as in the machine name. Now, if you set, for example, the header and save, you get an error message. Machine readable name cannot be longer than 64 characters. Yep. That's basically it about all the listed places the field label, description field labels are used. Are there any questions before we get to the points that are potential stepping stones.
So it looks to me as though that problem with blocks is really a separate issue from the rest of it.
But it was uncovered, having all those pages listed, and if you go through it for consistency purposes, then it got uncovered, and I considered it an important one.
Yeah. Oh, and let me just mention Anmol Goel has joined the meeting. Thanks for coming. Okay, so and if there are no questions about the context or where this comes up or anything, go ahead, Ralph. What are the questions we have to consider?
From my perspective, for consistency reasons, if you take a look at all those steps, the main purpose from my perspective is to keep the field label description that is clear and use the description for basically telling the user or the person using the interface where the description is actually used, and that is missing on a few places for vocabulary, for example. And for example, that outlier administrative summary, from my perspective, personally, for me, it creates misleading associations. With administrative summary, I expect something else and something bigger with more implications, basically. From my perspective, in general, it would be a good thing to keep the field label consistent and be just description, and use the description for that field to tell the user where the field or the description could be actually be found. That would be the most straightforward way to approach things from my perspective.
I agree that we should maybe keep to using summary for longer text, as we have the field type, something with some like a formatted text with summary. So it's kind of, that's a core field. So we use it as a kind of to use it as consistent for a longer text. But I was wondering, do we have somewhere, are we using something like administrative title? Or is that something that used to be?
I think maybe in Layout Builder, when you add a block, it asks for an administrative title.
Shall I quickly look in Layout Builder, Benji?
I'm sorry?
Shall I quickly switch to Layout Builder?
Yeah, if you want, you can use the link I gave.
Oh, okay. Where is it?
That's I installed Umami, so Layout Builder's enabled.
Okay, excellent. Where are we in article? Oh, no, we should go to recipe better.
Ah. No, I don't see it. I thought there would be.
No.
I may be misremembering.
No, doesn't look like there is. Nope. Nope. in regards of administrative summary. I think administrative summary was introduced based on Laurie's suggestion. I'm wondering if administrative summary would be better label for these fields because it describes what the description is used for. It looks like add menu description was labeled as description in the past and was intentionally changed in, oh, 1 second. It was changed to administrative summary in issue number 1926692. Menu description is misleading to allow for multiple input.
So I guess the first question is, should we be consistent across these? I think we should. Does anyone disagree with that? Does anyone think it's a good idea to have administrative summary on menus and description on everything else? I don't see anyone speaking up. If you're trying to talk, you're muted. Feel free to use the chat. I will try to pay attention to the chat and read in any comments if it's easier for you to type rather than talk. Okay, so we should be consistent, and I guess the advantage of administrative summary is that it conveys the information that this will not be shown to the user. This is something that only shows up in the admin interface, or at least that's the intention. I guess, Ralph, you said it had different connotations to you. And I think there's some value in conveying that information in the label rather than making people read the help text to see that this is an admin only label. Maybe administrative label would be clearer, since it is generally supposed to be short, isn't it? It's not really a description or a summary. It's really just a label for the admin interface. Simo, your audio is garbled.
I think summary would be like, what if this one is a summary? If this one would be summary, what would be the full text?
If this is a summary, what is the full text? That's a good point. Generally, we only have a summary when it's summarizing something else. Is that your point?
Yes.
Okay. Again, I repeated that because your audio is garbled. So Ralph, you've looked at this before. What do you think the preferred answer is?
I think it should be definitely consistent across all those occasions. I see your point in regards of administrative label or something in that regard, but still description also works for me personally, because a description, if I see description, I know it describes something, and then you get the description underneath, and underneath you get the place where it's actually used, and then you get the context basically. And all those block type, if you say, for example, block type, then if you create a block, then it's basically that description. So it is basically not, technically it isn't even a label that way, isn't it? Because it's a description.
Yes, I think you're right.
point with communicating that it's only in the scope of the administrative interface might be an idea, or administrative, but administrative description is also lengthy, and description it alone is rather clear from my point of view.
Yeah, and as help text goes, this is quite short. For instance, I'm looking at the add content type page, and the label on the description field is displays on the content types page. That's nice and short. So even though we generally try to keep our labels descriptive enough that you don't need to look at the description, that's a nice, concise description. So I could go with that. So I don't really like using silence as assent. I'd appreciate if you could at least give a thumbs up or a thumbs down reaction. I think we've agreed that we agreed for lack of objections, that consistency is a good thing. So shall we agree to follow the pattern that that we use the label description and the help text displays on the such and such page? I'm getting a thumbs up from Simo and Anmol. I think that's fine. Ralph, you think that's right? Okay, I'd call that a consensus. And so that applies to all of these types under admin structure.
And would you agree to create follow-up issues in regards of making removing that opt-in checkbox? Because basically on the views page, the description is shown anyway, and therefore I think it would make sense to avoid that extra tab, click, and just show the view name and the description underneath.
Whether it's a follow-up or not, I generally like to let the people working on the issue decide whether it should be done in the same issue or not.
Yeah.
Whether it should be done at all, I think this is another place where it would be good to follow the same pattern.
Yeah.
Agree, disagree?
Yeah, but at least voice it in the issue that it was noted. Noticed, I mean, sorry. And I would also add the comment about adding a block, because their block description is used, and the distinction what is a title and what is a description there is pretty mixed up, I would, and confusing potentially.
Yes, despite what I just said about letting the people working on it decide, this really does look like a separate issue to me.
Yeah.
And deserves a separate issue. It is kind of silly to allow a long description like you gave and then generate an error a couple of screens later because it's too long. The machine the machine name is too long. So it seems that we should definitely set a maximum length on this text field so that we don't get that error. And perhaps change block description to block title.
Yep, that is more the point of the issue, I suppose, because to start off with a description and then move to the title is confusing.
That's right. And just for context for everyone, this page is sort of fundamentally different from the other pages. The other pages were content type, block type, and so on. This is not a type. This is adding a bit of content, a block. So it needs a title and a body. And has anyone commented on when we got the term block description? Did that used to be title? Was it changed at some point?
I've asked Stephen a few days ago, but haven't got an answer yet. But
Okay.
I'll re-ask. Just ask for the history behind it.
Yeah, certainly worth discussing on the issue, but it should be a separate issue, I think.
Yeah, I think this might looks like something that where I, in some older version of Drupal, might have seen administrative title. So it was in this kind of context, I think, but I'm not sure.
Okay, Ralph, is that enough discussion of this issue?
I think, yep. Over to the next one. The next issue is issue number 3076054, error on single field without error message. It's an issue Laurie added to today's issue, and currently, oops, I do a reload. The behavior is simply that I've created a content type with a plain text field and made the text field the cardinality to unlimited and made the text field required. Let's make a test and just save. Oops. Say now, yeah, fill out the field. No, 1 second, that's the wrong behavior. If I add another item, I'm unable to. I get an error and I have to first, then I'm allowed to add something else. That's the current behavior. I quickly apply the patch again. Just wanted to demonstrate the current behavior. Now it's possible to add several empty fields. Now, for example, if you now save again, you get the HTML5 form validation test. That's the key detail. I have created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fields. I got next to enter one value, but now I'm able to save it. And if I go back in, 4 fields got pruned, and there's only one empty one and one field that is filled. Laurie posted in, apologies for the scrolling, where was it? In 63, the question, I'm wondering if the currently proposed solution is right. Why are we validating the items when users add new new values. When new values are added, the user is not actually submitting anything yet. So shouldn't we allow adding new values until they are actually submitting the form? This is at least the approach we took in, and he linked to issue number 2521800. That's the basic, the gist of the issue and the question behind. Any questions?
Yeah, I've been trying to read that whole issue, and I'm really having trouble because it's super long. Would you mind like giving a super brief summary, because Lovely pointed out like it would be great to kind of have like a design for inline messages, and I was working on that, and my God, I was trying to understand what was going on and what was actually needed, and I was like, no idea. So I'm not sure if it could be possible to have a super brief overview of the issue, of the problem that this is trying to solve.
So I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Are you just saying that you think that the issue summary needs to be clearer?
No,
Or
I'm not following the whole issue, and if I guess you all been on discussions about that before, but if you could like give an overview of the issue itself, the problem
oh,
that this issue is trying to solve.
okay. So you'd like Ralph to go back to the top of the issue and say what the problem is and not just this particular question?
Yeah, exactly that. Like just an overview, not the need to go like.
I got aware of this issue also about an hour before the meeting, and I just skimmed through. But from my understanding, the basic problem is the following: that basically, if a user, if for a field, you have the cardinality unlimited and it is required, and then if a user tries to add another item and hasn't added anything to the empty field before, it's not possible. And from my understanding, it was considered confusing that you directly run into an issue and you're not able to simply add several items you plan to add to a node, and instead you have first enter the first, enter the content to it, then add the next, and that was the problem behind it.
So an actual use case would be something like content, like some site builder has a kind of a text with all the options available, and then maybe 5 options, and then just clicks 5 times that, or actually 4 times, add another field, add another item, and then copy paste this to the empty slots that are already made from the other document, and that's kind of the quicker way to do it than one by one. So it's, in a way, the process is a little bit different. So that's something that I've been doing myself in the past. So it's kind of different work, allows for different workflows.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think I agree with Simo. I'm sorry, I was playing with my own copy of the site, so I didn't quite pay attention as I should have. But you're saying that it is a useful workflow to be able to add a bunch of blank fields, right?
Yes, I
Okay.
think it is.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Where it can go wrong is when you have translations, and if the translations are not linked so that the order of the items can kind of mess things up, like it did with the old version of predefined lists. But so it's just to be able to keep that order so that it's kind of doesn't mess up translations, then it's fine.
Okay, and the current behavior is that clicking add another item generates an error. So is this issue saying that instead of doing that, we should allow the workflow that Simo and I were thinking of?
Yeah. It's basically that you're able.
Okay, this is with the patch applied.
Yeah, that's with the patch applied.
Okay.
What happens if you, with the patch, if you leave, like from the middle, you leave one empty and then click save? Does it just skip that one and save the other 4?
You mean enter something in the first, in the second?
Yeah, and leave one in the middle empty.
And Christina in the chat says that she understands the issue now. That's good.
And it brings up the one point you brought up right before, Simo. The order isn't kept. The empty field is now at the last position, while it was before in the third position.
That would be, it doesn't really explain it, I think, but usually it does so that it kind of saves, like it keeps the ones that had input and it always has one empty. Usually they used to have always one empty so that you don't need to click add one if you want to add one more. So I think usually it always keeps one empty.
Yeah, I think Simo's right. I agree. I mean, if you were to leave 2 of them empty and
okay, no.
And submit the form, you'd still get one blank one at the end. So it's not that it's rearranging them, it's that it's removing any empties that you submitted and then adding an empty at the end.
But I have one problem. Why is it removing, basically, if you have more than one empty field, why those are just removed? Because then the whole validation for an empty field is just skipped and those empty fields are simply dropped, isn't it?
That is how it seems to work. I don't see that as a problem.
I'm not sure, because if the current behavior, in air quotes, is that you're not allowed to have an empty field at all, now simply dropping empty fields, I'm not sure, because basically there could be the case you need, like, for example, like Simo said, you need 5 options to something, and you clicked 5 times, though that you have 5 fields, and now by accident you forget the third one and just click save, and that way you end up with 4 fields and in 4 options instead of the necessary 5, and perhaps by accident you don't notice, and that way you are one option short of the necessary 5 ones. So having at least a warning or notification instead of simply dropping those empty ones, not sure, might be helpful.
You know, this reminds me of something we were looking at a few weeks ago. Ralph, would you mind editing a content type and adding a select list? adding a field. Oh, so not under content, but under structure. Yeah. You could either edit the second one, the difficulty, or add a new field. So, click on the empty field, enter something, and then use tab navigation. And get to add another item and enter there. Notice that the focus switched to where you want it to be after clicking add another item. I find that workflow pretty convenient. I think you clicked with the cursor, but having tabbed there, you could have hit enter or maybe space on the add another item button. So this is a behavior we have. I think this is a fairly recent change, right? We talked about this a few weeks ago. And it would be nice if we could make this the pattern elsewhere. And that's another alternative to the change proposed in this issue. Like if the point of the issue is what Simo and I were thinking, that it's convenient to go click, 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 add the number of things we want, and then tab through and add them. This is about as convenient. I mean, I would have to count to see how many tabs and clicks it requires with one or the other. But certainly an alternative is to have this same behavior on the multiple fields. I'm hearing a stunning lack of opinions. If anyone is trying to offer an opinion, you forgot to unmute yourself. But
I'm thinking that if we need to keep it so that you can't add more than one empty, at least it shouldn't give that kind of a validation error, but it should just say that you can't add more than one. So it should describe what the problem is. Like maybe no, it's kind of getting too complicated maybe to describe it as you can't have more than one empty at the one time.
oh, so you think that if say I with the current patch, say I know that I need to add a bunch of terms. So I click add another item 10 times and I have 10 blanks. And then I start filling them in and it seems that I only need 7 things. I think it's convenient in that situation to click save and have the 7 things that I entered saved. And I think you're saying that there should be a validation error at that point, and I have to click remove on any
No,
blanks.
I think I think not. Yeah, I was kind of, I wasn't thinking.
Okay,
So-
that is what you were suggesting, but I
yeah.
convinced you otherwise. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that there are 3 options. One is the current behavior without the patch. 2 is the behavior with the current patch. And 3 is the behavior that we already have when adding a select list. So the current behavior is that you're not allowed to add more than 1 blank. And that's what's described in the issue summary. And I think that if we stick with that, then the issue summary is right. We should add a message and not just highlight the field. I think the behavior of the current patch is a reasonable alternative. And as Simo and I said, that accommodates a workflow. And I think that changing the behavior to be more like the selection list is also a reasonable alternative. And it seems to me that all 3 are reasonable, and we're not choosing between 3 awful options. We're choosing between 3 reasonable options. Go ahead, Ralph.
I've quickly tested, as you can see, tested the keyboard. With the current patch, that focus isn't working like on the select list like you illustrated before. And I think with a bit of thinking about in the first place, that the ability to add several items at once in a row is sort of tempting and convenient, but in the long run, probably also problematic, also in regards of that dropping empty fields and so forth. So applying a pattern that is used currently on the select fields, and as Simo said, signify in case the initial field is left empty in some way instead of just a plain red outline, then I'm more leaning to the third option right now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for having consistency. And I guess one of your points is that if there are a bunch of empties and we submit the form, there might be different expectations about what should happen at that point. And having the consistent interface doesn't have that problem. And I guess, Ralph, are you demonstrating a version with the merge request that was opened after Lowry asked that question?
I installed. Yeah, I have merge request 5176 installed. The one by Godot is late. Godot is late.
Godot is late.
Oh. Okay.
And in case anyone listening doesn't know the reference, that's a Samuel Beckett play, Waiting for Godot.
Yeah. Now I realized it.
So I have one question. The thing that Laurie pointed on that message, so the pattern that we would be following here is the same or is completely different? Because I'm having a hard time to grab up my mind around like all the different options that are in there. But the thing that I'm not super sure is like having different patterns or different behaviors. So are we doing something completely different, or is it being proposed something completely different from the issue he pointed out? Or do you even know what was proposed on the other issue? Just to try to understand what's going on.
Proposed on what other issue?
So he linked an issue on his comment when he was saying that this is, yeah, in here. Exactly
one?
here. Yeah. So this is already merged in, and it has already a decision made in here.
Oh, and this is the issue that introduced the behavior that I was thinking of and that Ralph demonstrated. So Larry is making exactly the same suggestion I was making, that we be consistent with the user interface for select lists.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I think we're coming around to agreeing with Lowry's comment in number 63 that that it would be good to be consistent with the behavior for adding options to a select list. So consistency is good. That it makes it fairly easy to add a lot of options just using keyboard navigation. Right. I think people sometimes forget that even sighted users sometimes find keyboard navigation to be easier than clicking. So like I'm a big fan of tabbing through when it's consistent. I see Christina agrees with me. And Aaron agrees too. I don't know. It might be worth comparing the two workflows and seeing how many clicks does it take, and how many tabs does it take to do it one way or the other. But even if the other proposal, the merge request that Ralph has been demonstrating, even if that involves fewer tabs, that might not be worth the advantages of losing the advantages of consistency. So yeah, I think think we have some consensus that Larry's suggestion is right, and we should implement the same behavior that that was implemented in that issue for selection lists. I get a thumbs up from Christina. No one is objecting. If you're trying to object, you forgot to unmute yourself. Ralph gives a thumbs up. Okay. And Aaron gives a thumbs up too. Okay, I call that a consensus. So do we have a volunteer to leave a comment on this issue? I forgot to ask that on the first issue we looked at. Ralph took the trouble to present both issues.
I can comment on the first issue. If someone else could do the second, then
yeah, thanks. That would split up the effort.
Yep.
Any volunteers? All right, then I'll try to leave a comment on the second issue. And we're getting close to the end of the hour. I'd like to point out this week is when the alpha version of Drupal 10.2 is supposed to be released. So it hasn't happened yet, at least last time I checked, which was not that long ago. So I expect it'll happen sometime today. Any other comments before we quit?
Just a reminder that daylight savings time, people go out at different times. So this was, I think, my first week of the meeting shifted in. So just to be with.
Right, your audio is a little garbled, but I think most of the world's, or most of the Northern Hemisphere at least, switched to standard time a little while ago. The US switches this coming Sunday. And the meeting is scheduled in UTC. So Aaron had to wake up an hour earlier, or had to join the meeting an hour earlier today. I will have to wake up an hour earlier next week, or skip breakfast or something. But yep, thanks all for coming. And I'll be back next week. Hope you can join again.
have a nice weekend, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks. Bye.